hoops.com. I know it's been a while, but alas, here we are. There are some persons who offered some improvements, such as moving from audio to video. Hopefully, I get the time sometime before the season ends to make these adjustments. But with my schedule and being a staff of one, it's it's a little difficult. We all know, this is not the primary focus or my primary job, if you want to call it that. Anyway, before I move forward, let me take a moment to say don't forget to subscribe. If you like the video, give me a like. So, just to start things off, there are two things I wanted to touch on. And of course, I'm now starting, so I am now getting to it. But I will get on to more current issues. Not that what I'm saying is not current, but the events took place sometime back, and I think it's still an issue, which is why I'm still speaking on it. And those two things relate to the behavior of Draymond Green and how the league has dealt with it, and the Scott Foster, Chris Paul issue. Okay, so let's jump right into it. And I will say that I think the league really needs to address the issues associated with Draymond a lot better. The way they've dealt with it, with his issues, with his actions, the punishments they've doled out will shape expectations moving forward. And I say that because it seems the NBA seem to be addressing Draymond Green in a unique way. A manner which is different from how they've dealt with past situations. And what do I mean by that? Because I've been monitoring the NBA in relation to Draymond Green's actions a little bit. And when Draymond Green stumped on Sabonis in the playoffs, he only received a one-game suspension despite the level of danger the act presented. And I say that because, take for example, in the NBA Finals when Draymond Green hit LeBron James in the groin, despite the level of danger to the player being significantly different, you see, okay, Draymond got a one-game suspension, but in this situation, he also gets a one-game suspension, despite, different levels of danger. One where he hits the individual in the groin, gets one game. The other, he stumped on a person, he gets. And you could look at other similar incidences whereby, persons get a one-game suspension, and you could see the potential for injury, the potential for danger being significantly less than what was done to Sabonis. But I will get back to that and put it in better context of what I'm getting to as we move along. So let me step back just a little bit and say it's not possible for me to speak about Draymond Green and his issues without bringing up Joe Dumas. Now, I know people are hesitant to bring Joe up when it relates to, well, not just Draymond Green, but, his handling of issues, for lack of a better term, that involve various players. He is president of basketball operations and handling, a host of those things. So let me mention that I personally believe that Joe Dumas may be culpable in Draymond Green's behavior. That seems like a bit of a stretch initially as I say it. But follow me there. Follow me closely. It appears that since Joe Dumas took on the role of president of basketball operations, Draymond Green feels empowered to take his antics to a new level. Now, I don't know Joe Dumas personally, so I don't want to cast any aspersions on his character. I can only say what I see in response to certain situations. But the person who seemed to lead others to think that there is a flaw in Joe Dumas' character is Draymond Green himself. From the information I have, Draymond Green and Joe Dumas formed a bond, struck a friendship, whatever you choose to call it, from back when Draymond was in high school, somewhere in his sophomore year. Since then, they became close. Okay? And, whether Draymond Green sees him as that mentor, father figure, or something like that, and, Joe Dumas, sees him in a special light as well. But they formed that bond for a while, and they speak quite a bit, including, during the doling out of various punishments. Not unusual, but you would want to think of a conflict of interest when, the president of basketball operations is dealing with someone that he is as close to as Draymond Green, including, issuing out punishment to him. There would be a conflict of interest as well, because it's like a father dealing out punishment to his son. Do you wonder whether he would deal out similar punishment to someone he has no relationship to? And I mean, you could go into various professions. They would not allow a doctor to generally to perform surgery on his child or someone his relationship is. So I mean, you could see where I'm going with this. But set that aside for now. Prior to Joe Dumas becoming president of basketball operations, okay, Draymond Green antics was limited strictly, and I emphasize that, strictly, to hitting players in the nuts, whether it's with his hands or his foot. None of that was not bad enough, but that was the extent of his antics. Since Joe Dumas was hired by the NBA, Draymond Green has expanded his repertoire of antics. It only took 5 months after Joe was hired for Draymond Green to be emboldened. Note, the majority of the 5 months was in the off season. The next 14 months, Draymond Green punched his teammate Jordan Poole, used Sabonis as a springboard, choked Rudy Gobert, almost punched. I say almost because he didn't exactly had a clenched fist. Punched Nurkic. All right? All of those things in a short span of time. After Joe Dumas became president of basketball operations, that's the only thing that has changed in the NBA since you've seen Draymond Green actions change. And the one consistent, that aligns with Draymond Green actions is that the punishment that Draymond received has been very mild compared to his actions. And I say mild when you compare the punishment for similar actions that has been given in the past to other players. And you could, and one of the ways you could judge that, you could look at a host of other players when they speak about, okay, you know, what punishment, what level of suspensions or other punishments, he should receive. Okay? After this latest incident where he somewhat punched Nurkic, Joe Dumas in an interview says he doesn't want to focus on the number of games suspensions, but he wants to focus on Draymond Green healing. Now, when have you ever heard that? Okay? He doesn't want to focus on the number of games because he don't want people to think that Draymond got either too little time or too much time. I can tell you, when I heard that statement, my first thought was that when was the last time the league came out not just to speak on or to explain the punishment, because they've issued out statements, and on there are occasions where they've come out and they've tried to explain in interviews the reason for the punishment. But in this case, it seemed like, not just Joe Dumas and, Silver coming out and speak, but you could hear it when Joe Dumas explained his rationale, how he came up with it. It sounds like, when someone is more trying to convince themselves than convince you that, what I'm doing is the right thing. Go back and listen to his interview again. And note, there's a range that persons were saying, okay, 10 games, some people go as far as 25 games. But, his focus is when Draymond Green is healed, when he's well enough to come back, to playing, that's when the games. So if it was 5 games, if it was 10 games, 20 games, 50 games, whatever it is. So one had to take a wait and see approach to see what that really meant. And note, you could look at Ja Morant as recent, who got a 25-game suspension for a repeat offender in violating league policies. And you didn't hear anything about, he needs to seek help, or we're providing the help he needs. He went to counseling some degree, but was that the sole basis of his suspension? So you look at the treatment of one versus the other. You look at it, but it's not, again, I don't want to focus on just one player to say, okay, look, Ja Morant, he got 25 games there, and, it's a little more involved than that. But one thing you're seeing, as I mentioned, is Draymond Green receiving a light sentence. And how do you escape from giving Draymond Green a sentence or punishment? Because I keep using the word sentence, and because sentence may sound like he's going to jail, and it's not jail he's going to. He's really receiving the sort of punishment that he is supposed to get for his actions. But If you have to keep him on the lighter side to get that 10 games suspension, persons might be saying, okay, why is it would raise suspicion how he keep getting the lower end of it. So you take person's mind away from that and say, okay, you know what? When he's healed, he come back. So he comes back after 12 games. He didn't hit the 10 exact. So you have 2 extra games there. So persons are saying, well, actually, he didn't stop on the 10. He went a little higher than that. You know? So immediately, once I heard Draymond Green, the league announced he's well enough to come back, I said, Draymond Green fooled everyone again by giving a low punishment to his friend, his son, his whatever you want to, whatever he views him as. He got him with a slap on the wrist. And notice, since Draymond came back, he sent an apology to Steph because people had somewhat attacked Steph. Well, a specific individual. That's for another story in itself. He mentioned that, he feel bad because he hurt the league, he hurt his teammates, he hurt the team. The one person he did not apologize to is the persons he unprovokingly attacked. And I can say unprovokingly because, these are individuals, irrespective, did not deserve what Draymond Green did. And he know it's not deserved because in his own words, he said, he will stop or try to stop, something like that, stop his antics. And if he knows it's antics, he knows that it was not deserved. Yet, he has not apologized to these individuals. So the league needs to look into that. Okay? So I'll leave that at there. But they don't just the league don't just need to look at the antics. They need to take a closer look at Joe Dumas as it relates to Draymond Green as well. That's it. Now, the other thing I wanted to touch on quickly, and I won't spend much time on it, is Chris Paul. And it's a little old since the last incidents took place. Chris Paul got ejected by Scott Foster. And, some people are saying that Scott should not referee games where Chris Paul plays. Now, that's ridiculous. This is what I will tell people. Right now is always the right time to do or say the right things. The only people that seem to think there's an issue with Scott Foster refereeing games where Chris Paul plays is the media and some players. Show me anywhere where the referee association had a reason to look into Chris Paul, Scott Foster togetherness on the court, or if you want to call it, Scott Foster refereeing Chris Paul games. Has the league ever found a reason to look into it? Has the Players Association ever found a reason to look into it? Chris Paul says that there will always be an issue because of some incident involving his son. And we can get into that issue sometime later. Okay? If there is an issue, the issue is on Chris Paul's part. What I will say is this. Show me one incident where Chris Paul gave a tech, where Scott Foster gave a tech to Chris Paul, and the technical foul was not in line with the rules of the game. Better yet, show me one incident where Scott Foster gave Chris Paul a tech, and it was inconsistent with how the game is being called. This is what I will also tell you. if there existed any inconsistencies, there would have been an investigation, and they would either have disciplined Scott Foster, or they would have separated the two. But the one thing that constantly happens is whenever Scott Foster referees a game that Chris Paul plays, is that Chris Paul is trying to show up Scott, and he's deliberately acting up whenever Scott is refereeing his games. Chris Paul is a grown man. If he wants to continue his childish behaviors, that's on him. Quite frankly, if I was the one deciding who is refereeing the games, every game that Chris Paul is playing in, I would ensure Scott Foster is also in that game. Because, if Chris Paul from now on wants to throw himself out of every game, do it. Because he's a grown man. And he should be able to act responsibly when he is on the court. You see? Because in the past, he would get one tech, but in the last incidents, he would, he did it, he get his one tech to show off the ref. But for some reason, he said, let's see if he could push the boundaries a little further. See if he'll get that second tech. And he did. And of course, it was in line with the rules of the game. And you noticed, as I said, the referee association, the league, nobody on none of the parties that could look into the issue looked into it. Because they're fully aware that Scott Foster refereed the game in a professional manner. And there is no reason to give Chris Paul any special consideration. Okay? There is no reason to when he's deliberately acting in a childish manner. The league, it's not only their responsibility to protect the players, but the refs as well. Not because people come to see the players and not the referees. That means star players or other players, should attempt to intimidate the referees or even abuse them verbally or in other forms of actions. The league, and by that I mean the relevant parties I mentioned before, should always stand for what is right. And the right time is always now. hoopinhoops.com